Hi everyone, this is my review for Tank Duel North Africa expansion. It is an expansion for the original Tank Duel game. You will need the original game. It's not a standalone game. And what I'll do is we'll have a look at the components. I'll talk a bit about the new elements the expansion introduces to the game, and then give you some concluding thoughts as well. So first up is the rules and playbook. And some nice paper, normal GMT style, very well laid out. You've got all the new rules specific to the game and the changes that this expansion makes. So for example, there's some new steps for the administration step because of some of the new mechanics, in particular anything around the gust checks and hot weather and night. Then it goes through some of the new cards, and we'll have a look at some of those on the table in a minute. Some of the interesting mechanics that it introduces are around dust, as you would expect in the North Africa campaign, and they do add an extra layer of mechanics on top of the game. And they're actually again, as you'd expect with this game, it's very straightforward. The heat, haze, and fatigue. Got mines, night combat, some additional vehicle rules, and that's because of the types of vehicles that you get in the game. So you've got tanks and armor, for example, with different, with multiple guns. You've got some with smaller guns, open top vehicles, special ammunition, etc., etc. Then you also one of the sort of new elements or elements that is different than in this expansion to the first game is around infantry, and it goes through and explains how they work. Very nicely laid out, very easy and straightforward to read. Very well done, I would say. There are some additional Rabata rules, so if you're playing the game solo and you're playing with the Rabata, there are some amendments to that as well. And then we get into the scenarios section, and there are quite a few different scenarios. One of the things I did like about the this book is that it introduces some of those new mechanics in a sort of layered approach. So it's not the case that you can that you have to play the first scenario with all these extra new things. In fact, they spread it over a series of scenarios, which I really appreciated. I think it's a great idea. So it means you can learn each new mechanic sort of at a time by going through the scenarios. So if you and your group are playing this game multiplayer, which and I'll talk more about this at the end, but multiplayer tank duel games are a lot of fun. You can learn it together as a group by going through the scenarios. So for example, scenario 4 is where they introduce mines, so you can learn about how mines work. And again, very nicely laid out, nice and spacious. So again, if you're in a group and you're passing this book around, so everyone can see the sort of description of the scenario, etc. Very clear, which I really like. Then we're sort of into the historical scenarios, scenario 7. So for again, if you and your group are playing the game and you want to play some of the scenarios with a more historic feeling and flavour, it's the same game, but it just gives it some historical sort of context to the scenario. Then you have that as well, which again, so you get a lot of scenarios for your money, which I think is great. So in fact, 11 scenarios in total. Again, nicely laid out. Tells you all the order of battle, what tanks and vehicles you're going to be using for those historical scenarios, and something as a wargamer, as a person who's got an interest in North Africa campaign. Yeah, I definitely appreciated this, and I think it's a nice addition to the game. And then just a few notes. So overall, 20 odd pages for the additional rule book, but most of those in fairness are scenarios. So now we're going to have a look at some of the new additional tank mats, I'll call them, for the game. The layout is exactly the same as the core game, with the exception of the tank ID, and then you get counters to represent some of those. Here I've got one just here, for example. So you put, if this is number 3, You use the 3 counter on there. But fundamentally, their layout is the same as what you would expect from the first game. So, and again, they're double-sided. So here we've got a Sherman 3, for example. And on the other side, we've got a Valentine Mark II. Again, very nice art for the actual tanks themselves, all armoured vehicles. Nicely laid out, it's very clear. I found playing the game with different groups of people, everyone very quickly understood the functionality of these pieces for the game. It's very clear. You've got all your different range to hit on here, for example. Then we'll just quickly go through some of the maps. So M3 Grant. So this is where you've got a turret, which actually had a smaller gun, and then you have the 75mm gun in the sort of hull configuration there. Again, nicely done. A Matilda Mark IV A12. I really like this tank. There. Crusader Mark II. Again, double-sided. Valentine. Okay, now we're on to some of the Axis tanks here. Again, very nice artwork. Looks great. A Panzer IV E with the shorter barrel gun. Sorry for hitting the mic just then. And more, and so on it goes. You do get a good selection, I would say, of additional new tanks. Obviously, it's relevant to the historical period. So we've got an M13 there, for example. Got a Marder 2 here. Sort of open top vehicle, fighting vehicle. We've got the 8 Rad here, which is sort of a recon from a historical point of view vehicle that was used extensively in the North Africa campaign. And then we've got a Panzer IV with the F2 with the larger gun. So again, you get quite a few, and I've got some more on the table. So these are not all the ones you get, but I just wanted to highlight that sort of part of the game. You do get, I would say, as an expansion, you do get quite a few of these new tanks, and there's plenty. Obviously, there's plenty for as many players as you would want, and it's in keeping with the historical theme. And as I said, nicely laid out, nicely presented, very, very functional, very good usability. Top job on these. I really, really like them. So here we've got the game laid out. I've laid it out this way just so we can see it all on the camera. As I was explaining, the tank mats look great, very functional. Function 99% the same as the first game. Even with this M3 Grant, which has got 2 guns, very clear on the side here with the gun chart, which gun is which. And it tells you on the, if you're not familiar with the actual tank itself, it tells you on the actual artwork as well. So very clear. Then we've got some new counters. So the 1 and 2 for the tank ID. Got a vehicle dust counter there. You use them as the tanks as you're playing through the game and you're moving and stopping and so forth. And they obviously, they have a gameplay impact on the amount of cover, etc., as you'd expect. You get new counters. This is for the Allied tank. You get new crew counters as well. Very nice. And there's some new crew counters for some of the Axis as well. So, and all the counters are nice and chunky, hard wearing, very, very nice, nice pieces of artwork. They look great. And here we've got, for example, a larger muzzle flash counter, nice chunky counters, great stuff. Then in terms of cards, you get a stack of new battle cards. I've got some here, for example. It's the same layout as you'd expect. They, depending on the scenario you're going to play, you use the cards it tells you to replace. It's all detailed in the scenarios. So what you're going to be doing is taking your original battle card deck from the first game. You're going to be removing some cards and swapping them with some of the new cards that you get, and that makes your deck. That does take a little bit of time, depending on the scenario. And I can imagine if you wanted to play scenarios from this expansion and then wanted to play a scenario from the original game, you're going to have to do that every single time. It's not a big deal. It just takes you a little bit of time. Again, the cards are nicely done. as I said, the layout's exactly the same. You'll be completely familiar with it. They sit in the deck very nicely. I haven't sleeved mine, as you can tell, even though we play this game a lot. And yeah, absolutely top quality. Then you also we've got some anti-tank cards. You get some of the new infantry cards. You get some scenario cards that you'll be using. You get some player aid cards. So this is the card for night rules. It's more of a player aid than the sort of playing card, which is great. Got the minefield card there, for example. Again, very nicely laid out, in keeping with the tone. Very well done. So, and you get stacks of them. We've got the new infantry cards, for example. That's for the sort of the Allied side. And the Axis infantry, there we go. So forth. And they're very nicely done. Look great, and to the sort of standard you'd expect from GMT. In terms of the components, really happy with everything that I'm seeing, and it plays. What is nice about this expansion in terms of the components is it's super familiar. So you'll be straight away. You'll be, once you've sorted the deck out and you've skimmed through the rules of the new mechanics that are relevant to the new scenario that you're playing, you'll be straight away back into the game, because the layout, the cards all fit seamlessly into the original game. So some concluding thoughts. What I think about this expansion, I think the quality of the components is excellent. I think, and as what you would expect from GMT, it's a nice chunky box. You get a lot of stuff. You get a lot of the additional tank mats. You get a whole heap of new cards. You get some interesting mechanics that are layered on top of the existing game, such as the sand and the heat. I would say that some of the revisions, so the way the infantry work, for example, and the new steps into the turn are interesting and good and well thought through, and they add another sort of layer on top of the game. And I think this is what this expansion does really. It adds more layers to the game, and they are quite manageable. They're not completely, changing the way you play the game. I think what is good about Tank Duel, and I reviewed the original, the base game, so you can check that review out as well. For me, what I like about Tank Duel is playing the game with a bunch of friends, and it plays brilliantly fun with 4+ players, where each of you have a tank or an armoured fighting vehicle, and you're using the cards to move, you're using the cards to fire, you're pulling cards to see if you've hit, pulling cards to see if you've penetrated, and so forth. And if you've played the original game, then this plays fundamentally exactly the same way. What it does with those extra few mechanics is just layer onto some extra things because of the historical setting. And that's quite interesting. But it doesn't change fundamentally the way the game plays. So in a way, this expansion is just that. It's an expansion of content, is how I would think about it. More tank mats, more variety in the scenarios, some more nuances laid on top of the core mechanics, some new counters, and some more historical scenarios. And if you've got the original game and you play the original game with a bunch of friends, this will just give you that extra variety of content, I think. If you are new to Tank Duel and you don't know what Tank Duel is about, then check out the review I did, and I'll put a link for that at the top of this video. But like I said, for me, Tank Duel is at its most fun for 6 players. And it has this kind of furious, good-natured, easily conducive to a bit of game table banter between the different players, and that's a lot of fun. I think if you've got the original game and you play in it with some friends and you all enjoy it, and you're looking for sort of more more variety maybe, and you've got an interest in the North Africa campaign. So if you're playing with other, war games, but you want to play something together as a group that's not hex and counter, etc., that's more like an hour or hour and a half, 2 hours of beer pretzely type fun, then I think this expansion will add on to that for you. If you've got the core game and you play that and you enjoy that and you're playing in the game sporadically, do you need this expansion? I'll be honest with you, you don't, but what it will give you is more content. And so that's for you to determine if the content that you get in the original game is satisfying enough. The original game was Soviets and Axis sort of tanks. This will give you that sort of the Allied tanks, the British, the Commonwealth type tanks for that historical period. So I enjoy it because I like that period of history, and I, as you all know, I love tanks, and this has got tanks, so it's a no-brainer for me. But it is an expansion of content, I would say, and nicely produced, very nicely produced, and I could see the quality of the components. Will test. Will do you good, I would say. So yeah, it's a lot of. I love the game, the original Tank Duel game. I said as much in my original video. So this is more. This is more, and for that, great. I think I read somewhere that the next expansion may be Europe, so we'll get American and more Allied tanks. So I'm looking forward to that. I can imagine bocage and hedgerows and that kind of those terrain cards will be quite interesting. So hopefully more to come in this series, which is great because it is a brilliantly fun, light, furious, just fun war gaming. I mean, we use the word turn war gaming. It's obviously it's not hex and counter or anything like that. But it adds a variety to your wargaming collection, I think, which is brilliant. So yeah, good stuff. Please check out the original of the first game if you're not familiar with the game. And yeah, thanks for watching as ever. Thank you.